The wind howled through the trees, biting cold against the rugged face of Ethan, a seasoned hunter who had spent most of his life in these mountains. He knew the land like the back of his hand, its hidden trails, its dangers, its beauty. But that winter, something felt off. The woods were eerily quiet, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Ethan had been tracking something for days, a mysterious sound that didn't belong in the wilderness. It wasn't the wind, nor was it the cry of an animal. It was something far more desperate, something that gnawed at his soul. He'd heard it once, faintly on the wind, and then again, louder, as if begging to be heard. His instincts, honed over years in the wild, told him this wasn't a regular animal. It was something wounded, something in need of help. It wasn't until the third day of tracking that he stumbled upon the source. Hidden deep in a thicket, barely visible beneath the snow, lay a bear, its body trembling, covered in frost, and her sides heaving with labored breaths. Ethan's heart dropped. This wasn't just any bear. The creature before him was pregnant, her belly swollen with unborn cubs. She had been caught in a snare, likely set by poachers, and the trap had left deep gashes on her leg. She had struggled to escape, but it was clear that she had been there for days, weakening with every passing hour. The bear's fur was matted with ice and its breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. Ethan knew that she was on the brink of death. Without help, the bear and her cubs would die in the freezing cold. But Ethan also knew the risks. A wounded bear was dangerous. Even one on the verge of death could lash out in fear. He stood frozen for a moment, trying to assess the situation. He could hear the bear's soft growls, but there was no aggression in them, only pain and desperation. His heart wrenched at the sight of the helpless creature. It wasn't just the bear's survival at stake, it was the life of her unborn cubs as well. Ethan was no stranger to wild animals, but this situation was different. The bear wasn't attacking him, she was waiting for someone to help, even though she couldn't possibly understand that he was the one who could. Slowly he approached, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The bear lifted her head, her eyes locking onto his. There was a moment of recognition, a moment of trust between them that neither could explain. The bear didn't lash out. She didn't attack. Instead, she let out a low, mournful sound, her eyes begging for help. The sound, the desperation, hit Ethan harder than he expected. He reached into his pack and pulled out a knife, carefully cutting the snare that had trapped her. The bear's body trembled with every movement, but she didn't fight back. She didn't resist. She trusted him, and it was a trust that Ethan would never forget. The moment the snare was cut, the bear let out a sigh of relief, her breathing slowing as she shifted slightly. But she was far from out of danger. Ethan knew that the next step would be to get her to safety. Her wounds needed treatment, and she needed warmth. Ethan couldn't leave her there. He had to get her back to his cabin where he could tend to her injuries. But the journey wouldn't be easy. The snow was thick, and the storm was closing in, and Ethan couldn't do it alone. He would have to move fast, keep the bear calm, and somehow carry her the long distance back to shelter. As he moved toward the bear, ready to help her to her feet, he could feel the weight of the situation. He wasn't just rescuing an animal. He was rescuing an entire life, one that had been brought to the brink of death through no fault of its own. But there was something else, something deep in his gut. The bear wasn't just looking for survival. She was looking for something more, a second chance, a chance to protect her cubs. Ethan's heart pounded as he carefully guided her to her feet. She was weak, her legs trembling beneath her, but she stood. Slowly, Ethan led her through the snow, each step bringing them closer to safety. The storm began to pick up, the wind howling through the trees as the snow fell harder. But Ethan didn't stop. He couldn't. He knew that if he stopped, if he hesitated, both of them would be lost. As he led the bear through the forest, the weight of his decision pressed heavily on his shoulders. He had taken on the responsibility of saving a life, and he couldn't afford to fail. The wind howled like a beast, cutting through the trees and bearing Ethan and the bear deeper into the snow. The storm was fierce, but Ethan's determination burned brighter than the cold. Every step he took was a step towards saving the bear and her cubs. But as the hours dragged on, his body grew weary, and he could feel his resolve slipping. The bear, though limping, continued to follow him. Her breath came in short bursts, and Ethan could feel her weakening. But she pushed forward. She was relying on him, and he couldn't let her down. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and the night was growing darker. Ethan's pace slowed as the cold seeped deeper into his bones. But then, just as he thought he couldn't go any farther, he heard it, soft footsteps behind him. He turned quickly, heart racing, expecting the worst. But it wasn't danger, it was the bear. The bear, despite her injury, had somehow gathered enough strength to walk on her own. Her eyes locked onto Ethan's, and for a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. The bear let out a low, soft growl, a sound that Ethan recognized. It wasn't a growl of warning, but one of thanks. The bond between them had been formed not through words, but through action, through trust and compassion in the face of danger. Ethan stood still, his breath visible in the frigid air, as the bear slowly walked to his side. Her steps were slow, but she was no longer completely dependent on him. She had found her strength again. She had found her will to survive, and Ethan had been the one to help her reclaim it. As the night wore on and the storm grew worse, Ethan realized something profound. This wasn't just about saving the bear. It was about something much deeper. It was about life itself, about giving someone, or something, the chance to live. It was about making a choice, no matter how difficult, to protect life at all costs. And in that moment, Ethan understood that sometimes saving a life meant more than just survival. It meant honoring the trust placed in you by another creature. Finally, after what felt like hours, the cabin appeared in the distance. The warm light from inside seemed like a beacon of hope, a sign that they were almost there. Ethan's heart pounded as he approached, knowing that the bear's survival, and the survival of her cubs, was now within reach. The moment they reached the cabin door, the bear stopped. She looked up at Ethan, her eyes filled with something that spoke louder than any words ever could. She had trusted him. She had believed in him. And now, with her cubs on the way, she had something to protect once again.